Hello, and welcome to the AstroEnergy Astrology Show podcast with Astrologer Shelley Overton.
Hello, and welcome to the May 20th, 2021 edition of the AstroEnergy Astrology Show podcast with me, your astrologer from Central Florida, Shelley Overton. I want to welcome you and get right into it. We are talking this week about a few major events happening in astrology. We're going to address all of them. And then we are going to go over some current events, and probably it'll be intermingled because we've got a lot of different things throughout the week that I will be going over as we go over those astrology situations. So let's get started. Okay, the first part of the week we're going to see, well, today's May 20th, we have the sun moving to Gemini. The 23rd, which is Sunday, we're going to have Saturn Retrograde. And then next week on Wednesday, we're going to have a lunar eclipse and a full moon, followed by a week from this Saturday with Mercury Retrograde. The reason I'm bringing up Mercury Retrograde is because it is very significant to what we're doing right now, this time of year, specifically because the sun is in Gemini, and Gemini answers to Mercury. So Mercury is one of the rulers, or a ruler of Gemini, but also a co-ruler of another sign, which is, that's misleading. He rules two different signs, so Gemini and Virgo, and they square each other. So Virgo and Gemini are definitely going to feel this hit in the next week. Gemini, the energy that I've noticed most strenuously about what's going on with Mercury in Gemini is he will transit over the 22nd degree, which is the degree that we had the stellium in 2020 in January 12th and 13th. But it is also the degree of the son of the last president. And so he's a Gemini. And so we've got a 22-degree sun for him, and Mercury is at 21 today, 21 Gemini. And so this means because, and that's an interesting thing too, there is a 21-degree sun in the 45th president's chart, along with a 21-degree Gemini moon. And he has, let me see, there was another, two planets at 17, Jupiter at 17 Libra and Uranus at 17 Gemini. So as Saturn, well, Saturn's about to retrograde, but he will go over that 17 degree in the near future. And Venus is only 3 degrees away from a 17-degree hit on his Uranus. So there's a lot of mid-range Gemini, or just in general air planets, going over points in his chart. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. But I will bring up that he is influenced very strongly for the next month about what's going on. And so as we talk about Mercury going over this point, and this isn't just for him, but it's for the country, because in January of last year, well, not only the country, I suppose the whole world, because that was one of the trigger points of the pandemic. And so having Mercury in Gemini, which squares Pisces, and that's where Mercury was when the pandemic was recognized and really started to spread. I actually do have a pandemic chart, and I think earlier in the week I was going to talk about this, but let me just look it up here. This is a world event. See if I can grab it. So we've got it when it started, and I wasn't going to get into any other charts, but it's just so rich, you know. Let's see. Do I want that one? Oh, I think I had, yeah, there it is, Wuhan. I brought that into this too. I'm just kind of eyeballing it. So interestingly, what I got for Wuhan. So Wuhan, China is founded. This is going to go all over the place. I'm just giving you a heads up. You know, if you're looking for linearity on this podcast, you're probably not going to get it because the air energy affects my chart like this. I'm here, I'm there, I'm talking about all sorts of things. But for me, that is an interesting podcast because it brings in channeled information on the spur of the moment, which gives you a richer fleshing out of what all is going on. But what I did was looked up Wuhan, and then the interesting thing is the city chart for Wuhan, China, which I didn't realize is still a fairly new city, because what happened was on May 19th, 1927, they combined two other entities, two other cities into one universal city. So we actually have a May 19th, 1927 date for the founding of this particular city. And in that chart, we have a moon at 21 degrees of Taurus, excuse me, not Taurus. I don't know why I thought Taurus, Sagittarius. So moon at 21 Sagittarius, which I find really interesting because that's a nodal point, a nodal placement, not long ago, recently, because now the nodes are still in Gemini and Sagittarius. So there is a greater, and the natal node, looking at this, unbelievable, for Wuhan, China, is actually exactly my south node and my north node, which is 28 degrees south node in Sag and 28 north node in Gemini. It's exactly the degree of my own. So that's quite interesting. And the sun of Wuhan is exactly on my Jupiter. So yeah, am I a little nervous? I'm a little nervous. I get my second shot on Friday. So anyway, we'll look more into that as we go along if we so need to. But yeah, we've got a lot of the stellium energy for March 11th, which is when I believe it was announced that the virus had made it to the U.S., and that's when it was recognized in the U.S. So we had the sun at 21 degrees Pisces, of course, squaring that that energy of 22 degrees with Gemini for this particular return. So there's so many things going on here, and they're floating around my head, and I don't feel like I'm really expressing them accurately to what I want to say. So what I see, what I notice, is 22 Gemini is the sun of Trump, where the sun is, and it squares that. So not only does it hit that, but it's going to be moving forward across that point. Let me just look and see when that is exactly. Hang on. I have all this information, and I spent a good half hour prepping it for you. And there it is. It's right here. So 22 degrees, and this is another interesting thing, on May 22nd. So 2-2, and then his chart has a sun at 22. And then when it retrogrades, it goes back over that degree on the 6th of June, which is exactly 6 months after the insurrection. And it's at 23, so it's really just 5 minutes of astrological time before it goes into 23 degrees Gemini. So I have it overnight between the 6th and 7th of June, where Mercury exactly hits Trump's sun. And then the final 22 degree Mercury is going to be the 6th of July. And so right around the 4th of July, which of course is going to absolutely connect to what we are as a country, because 4th of July is what our country was founded on. So it's really fascinating to me as an astrologer and kind of an amateur numerologist to see all these different points being triggered, but specifically that degree. And I know I'm not the only astrologer to mention it, but you know, when it's there, when it's obvious in the charts you do, you recognize it, and it is a powerful point. So what does that mean? What does Mercury mean? Well, Donald Trump's sun is ruled by Mercury, and it's at that degree. And so this particular Mercury retrograde is very significant to what he's experiencing in and of his own life, but also as he relates to the country because of the degree of 22 from a year ago. Hi, it's Editing Shelley, and I wanted to interject into this part of the video because I don't really feel I brought everything together, and I want to preface this with the idea that there are a lot of things that I could speak on about what's going on currently and how I see things developing, and I probably did a lot more predictive astrology before, but I've gone through kind of a phase where I'm very conscientious about what I put out there, and also politics. But I just have to say, the reason that this transit for Trump is so significant is because it makes everyone around in the country or in his group, but mostly the country, really see the words that were said and see them for what they are. It has the retrograde of Mercury on his Sun. It brings what he says to clarity, and it shows everybody exactly what he was doing, exactly what he was saying, and that it's kind of like taking him to task for what he said. On top of the fact that June 6th, like I said, was the exact opposite Sun to the insurrection. So couple his 22-degree Sun, 22-degree Mercury, transit of 22-degree Mercury, Sun at, 16 or 17, I think? Or no, it was, hang on. Okay, his 22-degree Sun. And then Mercury is transiting over his Sun. His identity, his ego, how he sees himself, that degree is exactly the manifestation he chose to come to this life under. And because that 22 degrees in conjunct to last year, and the whole Pluto transit at 22 from last year, this whole last year has been a very significant year in his life. Because we have the retrograde of Mercury over his Sun, his identity is so closely linked to this particular Mercury retrograde and who he is, how he expresses himself, how people see him, how people see what he says. And then, like I said, add to it the opposition of the Sun to the Sun of the insurrection, adds fuel to the fire of what's going to happen. So can I say for sure what's going to happen? No, but I can infer that his words are going to be reviewed. He is going to have a perspective shown on that event and what he said with his words. And it's all culminating in the same 3 weeks. It's all coming to a head between the retrograde next week and, quite honestly, today Mercury is at 21. It goes to 22 tomorrow, and that's exactly on his Sun. So for him, it even starts this week, which we can already see. And I mentioned it last week. He's going to be more in the news. He is more in the news. His ideas, his words, how he interacted with the Republican Party and the insurrection, all that's coming up in a big swirl of information. With the retrograde, that information is put out when it's forward, it's reviewed when it's back, and when it goes retrograde. And then when it goes forward again, it's like, okay, now we know how to act upon it. So by June 6th, there will absolutely be a direction to take from that event and around Donald Trump. And that's really what I wanted to get to as a gist of what I was saying. Okay, that's all. Not only that, but Mercury/Gemini rule elementary education, children in a learning setting, small pets, neighbors, aunts and uncles. It rules intellect. It rules kind of a know-it-all energy. It's people who have to express what they're thinking, and that can come across as know-it-all, but it is also condescending at times. If the ego side of Gemini, if it's this information that is expressed in kind of a detached, arrogant way, people might not listen to you. So, that's also part of it. And because of the nature of Gemini, there's a dualistic nature, which means I say one thing and I do another. Now, to be fair, yes, Gemini, I would say personally, my own experience, but also observationally through my career as an astrologer, is probably, I hope that I don't get now for this. The most suspect sign for not telling the truth. And like I was going to say, to be fair, Gemini energy is an intellectual energy, but that also means that when you're in the energy of Gemini, it is very much the present. Like you look at life from that perspective. And then when you're in the next situation, you look at it from that perspective. So, you know, from a larger spiritual standpoint, let's put it this way, people, especially earth signs, who are very practical and pragmatic about follow through and understanding things that are stable and sincere, when they deal with Gemini is an air energy, so it's ever changing. It's very quick. It's like Mercury, the element, and it is ruled by the planet Mercury. So it's also very unstable. And because of that constant finding new information, it does not come across as a sincere sign. But if you are experiencing it, which we will all be and are right now, we've got Uranus, wrong. Let's put DJ out of the way here. We've got North Node, Venus, and Mercury in Gemini. So we're all experiencing an accent of that energy somewhere in our charts. And so we're all finding out how we can say something, and then the next moment we'll be in another scenario, and then what we just said is not relevant to the current situation. So things change. But from a perspective of a rooted, grounded earth person, that looks like insincerity. It can look like lying, and it may actually be lying. But from a Gemini perspective, it's just going with the flow. And so as an astrologer, definitely I have come to embrace things that as a person might have rubbed me the wrong way, because I have a ton of earth energy in my chart, a ton of water. And earth and water do not particularly mesh well with air and fire. But when you are an empath and when you do readings, you run into people with all these energies. And my sister is a Gemini. Her birthday's in 3 days, so happy birthday. And you learn to try and see things from another perspective. And I think that that is a really good lesson for everybody on the planet right now, because we have gotten away from that understanding and that empathy for our fellow man. But really, I would say probably as a sign, Gemini is the most stressful to what my chart looks like. But at the same time, I use these transits to really enmesh myself in an understanding of what that means and why it might be that way. So if you're wondering what that all means, it means we're learning, we're growing, we have something to say, and it's going to come out. And that's what you're going to experience with this Mercury energy. Now, when he retrogrades, of course, the lesson throughout this whole process, forward, retrograde, forward, when it goes over those degrees, and it goes over, I wrote them down, I'll have to look them up here. Give me a second. Well, I thought I did. Where'd it go? Mercury retrograde is until next week. So the retrograde starts at 24 degrees of Gemini. And let me look it back up. I think it's like 13 that he goes back to, but I have to look it up. 16. So he goes to 16 degrees. So everything between 24 and 16, those 8 degrees, will experience the 3 transit energies. So forward, initiating, understanding, learning about something, saying a truth, experiencing an awareness, an increased thought. I've got so many chills with that. So we're really expanding our understanding. We're expanding how we express ourselves in the material world. And then when it retrogrades, we have to go back. We have to walk back up. Let me try and express that better. It's another thing. You know, how are you expressing yourself? Are you saying it properly? Are people understanding you? During the retrograde, there may be misunderstandings. You're going to have to do it again. That's just the nature of a retrograde, but also the nature of Mercury in retrograde. So it's about speaking twice and doing it again. So yes, we already have Mercury there. So we've already been experiencing this duality of expression, but also Venus. So it's 2 of something, 2 phones, you know, we've got double. one of my phones is not working and has to be repaired. So honestly, I'm kind of waiting till the Mercury retrograde because I'm going to have to repair it anyway. I may as well just send it out when it's retrograde, and then I can get it back when Mercury goes direct. But Venus will be goods that are associated with communications. So that's why during Mercury retrograde, you're always told to back up your material, well, your electronics. But this time, more specifically, because Venus represents the material world, she is, goods, retail goods. She's going to be of concern with this retrograde because as she's moving forward, Mercury goes back over her. And so there's going to be a conjunction again. And we already had one Mercury conjunction with Venus, and now we're going to get another one. And then, of course, when Mercury goes direct later, he'll go back over Venus a third time. So not only is it about communications, but it's also about the material goods associated with communications. But it can also be just goods. Anything that we use to express ourselves. It can be T-shirts or, something that represents our identity or our sense of self, because remember, Sun goes into Gemini also today, and that would be, of course, you're probably watching this after it happens, but Sun goes in, where are we at here, 2 weeks in the future, 3:37 p.m. Eastern. So if you're watching this anytime after Thursday at 4, you're going to have the energy of Sun as well added to this cluster. Okay. That is going to be really big. We will have the North Node, the Sun, Venus, and Mercury all in Gemini, which can shoot over to the Sagittarius side. And Sagittarius is about transportation. Gemini is about short distance transportation and vehicles of transportation. So I would definitely say that there's going to be also another energy associated with travel and education, higher education, where we may have to do things twice. My daughter just started her first class this morning and for her summer semester at college, and she may have to go back over something. Speech will definitely be part of that and part of this transit. So it can mean that we are getting opportunities for public speaking. My daughter, her Mercury is in Pisces, and that's, interestingly right now, we've got Moon in Virgo, which squares Gemini, but it also squares Pisces, or it opposes Pisces. And so we've got Jupiter at 0 Pisces, and we've got Mercury at 22 Pisces. So there is an intro to Pisces energy with Jupiter and kind of an outro or an extro energy with Neptune, which is in the final degrees of Pisces and really wrapping up what the storyline is about, expanding our awareness and intuition and knowledge. One of the news stories that in my mind particularly represents, including Saturn about to go retrograde, is the storyline, that's the 23rd again, and the storyline, because Aquarius, about UFOs in common knowledge. And I was reading just before the podcast on online that the powers that be in Washington, including Obama, including heads of other organizations within the government that oversaw some of this during Trump's, it was Ratcliffe, intelligence director, that they're all saying kind of the same thing, that we are looking into it. We have footage. We think it's unusual. Obama admitted that there are anomalies, that we don't understand the patterns of movement of these objects that we know about. So it also was saying in this article that we're going to find out more in the future. And I second that because, of course, Uranus and Aquarius rule understanding of space and the unusual. I think science and space awareness is going to ramp up under the Aquarian energy of the age of Aquarius, but also Uranus. And Uranus and Taurus brings the information and understanding down to the material plane. Jupiter going into Pisces, remember my formula for taking any sign or any planet and figuring out the material side of it or the real world manifestation of it is if you put, say, Jupiter through Aquarius, which he has been this year and will be again after July, Aquarius is the information, the understanding, the identity, or first house of this situation. So Aquarius, UFOs. The second house of that is Pisces, which is bringing it out into the material world, the manifestation of it. And with Jupiter going into Pisces this week, we are now understanding the material world repercussions of UFOs or UFO sightings. And I know they've renamed it every so often. Powers that be like to rename things. And so this time they're calling it unidentified aerial phenomenon, so UAP. But yeah, that's coming into our awareness now this week in the news, and that's directly related to Jupiter. So Jupiter is transportation, knowledge, understanding, wisdom, and it's everything that Sagittarius would be, because again, Jupiter and Sagittarius are linked because Jupiter rules Sagittarius. But in Pisces, co-ruler of Pisces, he's bringing out this kind of hidden visceral energy that we all are aware of that maybe we don't talk about, and always trying to understand, trying to grow and bring in new information. That's Jupiter. So yeah, next year should be really interesting with this particular news story and energy coming into our awareness. Okay, let's see. All right, so Thursday, Sun and Gemini. Our egos are very much closely linked to the information we know, the information we impart. And again, Trump coming in as one of the key players and definitely going to be taking a strong hit from this retrograde personally, because again, his sun, his ego, his sense of self is going to be directly challenged over the course of this particular retrograde, which also means that he's going to be in the news, because what is the news if not a Gemini endeavor? It's expressing out to the masses. It's bringing information out. Okay, I'm going to put him aside, and we're going to look some more at the chart. So Mars is in Cancer right now. In trine, Mars is at 16 degrees to the 22 degree of Pisces, Neptune. And so there's going to be a real strong emotional bond to something going on at home, where maybe it's a little bit more sentimental for us to think about mom, to think about family, and to think about the security we have of home. I know I discussed this a little bit last week, but it just continues. As long as Mars is in Cancer, there's definitely going to be this home connectedness and the sense that I need to be secure. And then, of course, when Mars gets to the latter degrees, he actually opposes Pluto, and that's the first week of June. And interestingly, Mars opposite Pluto is exactly the same time that Mercury hits that 22 degrees, and also will be influencing Trump. So look for June 6th. Again, the sun is exactly opposite of the insurrection. So there will be a pulling back and a looking back on it from afar kind of energy. So just be aware that in about 2 weeks, we're going to relive a very strong storyline of the insurrection, and Trump will be playing the field, so to speak. There will be people coming out of the woodwork to defend and promote that point of view, but and it will be challenged. It's going to be challenged. I've already seen some of that in the news, that the Republicans are protesting another inquiry into the January 6th insurrection. That's going to reach peak at June 6th because of what I just listed, the sun opposing the sun of that day. It will be like, okay, I'm standing back, looking back on it, and then as it goes forward, that will reduce. But keep in mind, again, until we have the last transit of Mercury over that 22 degrees, we're probably not going to be free of any kind of culmination of a storyline, finishing off of a particular viewpoint. So once again, let's see, we saw it is the final pass, 6th of July. So yeah, by the 6th of July. So it's going to be, think about it. the identity of our country. And so starting this week, going all the way through the next couple months, and then having Jupiter expanding our awareness, giving a visceral perspective to what happened during those times. Jupiter in Pisces, what happens then is we are not able to deny it on some level. Of course, Jupiter is going to be retrograding. And so those ideas about how we perceive it, it is illusion or how we escape reality. So Pisces energy really, honestly, Pisces have a difficult time with the material world at times because they are so closely linked to the spiritual side of things. The material world can be too much for a Pisces influenced person to take. And having Jupiter squaring, the sun, Jupiter squares the sun this week, our identities are going to take a hit from the energy of Jupiter. And Jupiter will tell bluntly what it sees. And in Pisces, it's really conflicted. I'm telling you, the Gemini energy wants to express and is very much going to be coming from ego this week, whereas the Jupiter energy is wanting to run away and not see the truth because it just is too much for them to take. So how we individually experience this is just like that. It's going to be, there's truth, but it is in conflict with what I know on a visceral, spiritual level. And the information's coming out, but it's really painful. It's going to hurt. And we're going to have to go back and review that over the course of the next 2 months. And then we're going to finish off that story when Mercury goes direct. And then, of course, Jupiter goes back into Aquarius. So once Jupiter retrogrades and goes back into Aquarius, Aquarius is the intensified energy of Gemini. So it's going to really pointedly say, this is what you have. This is the bed you made. Are you going to lie in it, or are you going to move on? And so one of the issues that I wanted to bring up this week that I even wrote down so I wouldn't forget is the transiting back of any planet. So when a planet goes through the final degrees of a sign and then changes signs, but retrogrades back into that old sign, it's even more intensified as something we have to go back over that we are really through with. When we go with the planets through the end degrees of a sign, it's like the culmination. Remember, I said it's like the sun going down on the horizon and it flashes green and then it disappears at the end when it sets. We've had that moment. We've had that moment of intensity, of culmination, and now we've moved on and we feel this new energy, the new vibration, which can help us expand our awareness of what we just went through. But when we have the planet go through that end degree, have that big moment of explosion and release, and then we go into a new sign, but yet that planet retrogrades and goes back to the old energy, it can be really stressful. It can be uncomfortable. And what happens is, in any situation, whether it's Mercury at the final degrees of a sign going back into the one it was, or at the beginning, final degrees beginning and then back, or in this case, Pluto, we're going to have to see whether or not where we've been is really where we want to be for the future. And really, I see it as a time where we really integrate into our lives that we are truly finished with an old storyline. So while we are about to experience Pluto, well, we already have Pluto retrograde, but and that's the Capricorn energy, but we're also going to experience the Jupiter going back into Aquarius. We have a lot of this energy of the insurrection to deal with, and a lot of the energy of the former presidency, and all of what I consider to be the big lie about how it didn't really happen. And I continually see it. My parents watch certain news channels still, and I overhear it at times, and that lie is still being perpetrated. But with Mercury going over these degrees and with Jupiter back into Aquarius, which, keep in mind, Jupiter went into Aquarius at the end of last year. It was very much in new energy at the beginning of this year. It's going to really blow out of the water. I think personally, as an astrologer, I think it's going to really break apart any final vestiges that were kept from the idea that it didn't happen, which I know is still being perpetrated as a storyline and a narrative. And it's being diminished, which many things that we have seen have been in the last year, that, oh no, that didn't happen, it's really this way. What we're moving towards with Aquarius energy, and Saturn is there right now, Pluto's coming into it, and Jupiter goes back into it this year. We are seeing an awakening and a truth-telling that cannot be denied. And so it's going to just continue breaking apart the lies that are being told by governments all over this world. And it's kind of like we see this bad behavior going on in the world, and it's being called out, and it's as if the bad behavior gets worse because those who have gotten away with their lies and the bad behavior don't want to be called out for it. And quite honestly, in many different ways, I've experienced a lot of that in my own life and in my career, that you know what's wrong, but you also don't call people out because you know it's so uncomfortable that you can be bullied when you call people out for the truth. And it gets very personal and it's private and it feels bad, especially if you're an empath. You don't feel good when people diminish you and berate you. And yet this energy, now that everything's moving into Taurus, Uranus is in Taurus, the beautiful clarity and clarifying energy of Uranus is in that pragmatic, down-to-earth, grounded energy of Taurus, saying, no, what seeds are you planting for the future? Is this truly what you want? So as Uranus goes retrograde over the next 7 years in the course of his transit through Taurus, little by little, we really see the shift in the material world in how we treat people, in how we treat women, in how we treat people of color, and how we treat foreigners wherever they may be. This is all going to be shaken out from Uranus going through Taurus. So this air energy and then the earth energy and then the water energy all work to combine the awakening, the clarity that we see through events, and then the retrogrades work in our lives to help us understand where we've been, give us a second chance at really deciding our fate for the future, and then really the chance to move forward once the retrogrades go direct. And so that's really the course of this summer. And I guess I'm just letting you know also as a way to help myself cope, because it's going to be a summer of retrogrades. And the summer this year, the retrogrades are specifically challenging a lot of what we've lived through for the first 3 months of this year. And so it's really a going back over the actions of others from the past year and what we think of that, how we live in integrity, and how we choose to integrate that into society. There's a challenge right now to voting rights. There's a challenge to abortion and the rights women have gained from that. There are challenges, on the other side of it. There's a challenge to people leaving Afghanistan. Can we leave Afghanistan? What about Israel and Palestine? On which side of that issue are we? And so there are world issues all over. I mean, I just read about the Chilean voting this week, which I'm very excited about, that the majority, which was only 43% of the voting public in Chile, they voted in a democratic government, which is a direct taking to task, for lack of a better word, of the dictatorship that has been there in the past. And so it's now going to be a very democratic society that is kind of flying in the face right now of the dictators doubling down on their territory all around the world. So I do have hope for the future. And I guess I want to say that to everybody watching, because I do get a lot of people, I have people in my immediate environment that are very concerned for the future and where we're heading, and a couple family members, well, maybe 3 or 4, but I am optimistic because I know astrology and I know where we're heading. I know we're coming into an awareness timeline, and I also believe energetically we are not going to have apocalypses. We are not going to have this terrible energy that wins out, because so many people are waking up, and I accredit Aquarian energy directly for that. And I'm really, really grateful for the shift and transition of the planets in the world. It really does affect us on our day-to-day lives, and it affects us in a very broad-reaching way. And I guess from that perspective, Pluto, which gets really maligned since astronomers demoted it, so to speak. But I can tell you, as a 40-plus year astrologer, Pluto is the most significant body in the heavens that affects us in the direction of our lives in profound ways, where we will never go back to being the person we were. And so that has tremendous power and potency in our world. So don't diminish Pluto's effect on everyone, because it will change our world, and it has in this past couple of years. And that's a direct result of Pluto joining with the planets that he was with, Saturn, Mercury, and Sun last year. Yeah, and then the nodes as well. But I'm not trying to scare you. I just want you to understand the profound input that the slower moving planets have. And we are discovering more and more bodies in the heavens. We are discovering, what is it, UAPs. And so it is, I don't think it's the final frontier. I think oceans are probably more of a frontier for us than space, because we've been exploring space for so long. And yes, we go in the oceans, but I really think that the nature of oceans is very hidden and ruled by Neptune, while space is ruled by Aquarius. And we are in Aquarian times right now. So that means that as Pluto gets through Aquarius and gets to Pisces, which is 25 years away, maybe more, we're going to be discovering the oceans. And the oceans are probably the final frontier. And when that happens, I think that's when our world will be complete. We will have finished off all cycles of earth, fire, water, and air. And being that Pisces is the final element energy of the zodiac, when Pluto gets to Pisces, definitely we become one. That is the energy of healing. That is the energy of peace. And if we have not gotten our acts together in violent ways by then, I don't know what else could happen. Maybe another sinking of islands and continents like Atlantis. I don't know. I am very optimistic. I think that we are on the precipice of amazing times of enlightenment and peace, and all of the energy that we are experiencing through violence right now is really growing pains. And I know it's difficult because I have an aunt. My aunt is Pisces, and she doesn't even want to go out of the house anymore, which is a true Piscean way to deal with it. But I keep encouraging her that we are seeing this because we have to go through the grunge to get to the oxygen, to get to the clear air. We have to understand the nature of the pollution before we can get past it. And right now we are definitely going through this pollution energy. So let me try and wrap some things up for you. I'm not even sure how long I have here. And last week's was a whole hour. Oh my goodness. My apologies to anybody who wants a quick rundown of what's going on, because I know I try to give content. I really want to give good content. That's why I tend to run on a lot more. Friday this week, we have a trine between the moon in Virgo and Pluto in Capricorn. We also have a square between the moon and Mercury in Gemini. And so really kind of the overarching energy I see in the next week is going to be the Mercurial energy and the Gemini energy really interacting with Capricorn, but also the Cancer and Taurus areas of the zodiac. So if you're any of the other signs, you're really being triggered in the Gemini area for what you're saying, how you're integrating your thoughts. And then Taurus as well, which is the materiality, how you look at the material world, how you integrate your voice. Because remember, Taurus rules the throat. So this could be a week of throat issues if you're having a tough time getting your voice heard. Not surprising. And then the Cancer energy, again, Mars is moving into opposition to Pluto. So it is about career and where you live. the Pisces Virgo energy that we're experiencing for the next few days, the moon is in Virgo and then the Pisces, and then there's a T-square between the moon and Mercury and Neptune, probably tomorrow on Friday. And so it's about transportation, education, healing, and understanding how your thoughts integrate and how you can really own your perspective and not try to run away. And it is a healing time. It's a time for healing words. Doesn't mean you're going to necessarily experience it out of the gate. There's probably going to be something that triggers a need for healing. And that means that we're going to have, verbal confrontations, it's likely. And especially the Cancerians, all the Geminis in your 12th house. And so that means that there are hidden things being expressed. And this particular chart that I'm going to post doesn't really show Vesta. Maybe I can do an asteroid version, but Vesta is also still early degrees of Virgo. And that means that the sun is going to be moving into a square with Vesta. And Jupiter is, of course, for the next month and a half, early degrees opposite Vesta. And so there is a conflict around words being said and the need for movement, the need for taking action and taking action on the words. And I guess my advice for that would be detach yourself and your ego, because Sun's going to be in Gemini. Detach from taking things personally. I know it's really difficult. It's difficult for me, but that Virgo in my chart, I grew up with that self-critical persona. And so the Virgos are probably going to have a difficult time, because Virgos, believe it or not, are a sensitive lot, and I think very psychic in the zodiac. And so you're going to find that there's some wounding, verbal wounding, but if you can ride it out like a boat on water, like a floating boat, or the leaf, it just goes with it, it's going to be easier. Don't take it personal. Just know that every time people say something, not only is it not yours, it's theirs. And you can maybe look at how they are saying this as a way of coping with their life, but also it's just words, and it's how we take them. We only have the power to react. We don't have the power in any other way. It's always our reaction, and that's the power point, the point of power in our lives. So yeah. And then Saturday, Mercury squares Neptune, which is going to really put a fine point on it, that we're going to have ideas that are going to be really difficult to hear out loud, but that's what they're going to be done. That's what's going to be done. We're going to hear them out loud. Okay, so Saturday with Saturn. No, it's Sunday. Excuse me. Sunday, the 23rd, Saturn retrograde. So of course we're already in the shadow period. And let me just see how long that shadow period lasts till. It's quite a while. Hang on. Let's see, Saturn. I'm sorry, I do old school with the paper here. So retrograde's at 1331, and that doesn't even happen until January of next year, that it goes past the point of shadow. So the shadow lasts throughout the whole rest of this year, a shadow or retrograde of Saturn. And if you have 13-degree planets in your chart, they're going to be somehow interacting through aspect with Saturn. So it probably would behoove you to go look at your natal chart and see where your 13 degree is, because that's kind of where it kicks off. And then, of course, it retrogrades. I think it said it retrograded till 10 degrees. So 13 through 10. Nope, 13 through 6. So there's 7 degrees, 6 degrees through 13 of a sign, which means those degrees, those 7 degrees, will be an aspect to Saturn. So if you want to know where that falls, I do give readings, and you're welcome to check it out at angeliczodiac.com. And then we've got, so the Saturn retrograde is going to expose how things are working in structure and where we really need to awaken. And where we have awakened, like I said, from the beginning of the year till now, let's review what we've learned. Is what we've learned something we can integrate? How will we integrate it? What kind of sense of freedom do we want in our careers, which really Saturn in Aquarius is about entrepreneurship, and what actions have you taken to structure those things that will support you in the future of your career. And then finally, Wednesday next week is the full moon in Sagittarius, which means the sun's in Gemini. And it also means, let's see, it's only at 5 degrees and 26 minutes of Sagittarius. So it's early Sagittarius, and it's a full moon, which is really interesting because the last couple full moons have been at early degrees, and the new moons are at late degrees. So it's like opposite to how you would think new moon, new energy, beginning of a sign, but it's the opposite. So we're culminating a story about breaking into a new path, and being that the moon is at early Sagittarius, which directly squares the ruler of Sagittarius in Pisces, Jupiter, look to a walking back of the mask energy, or I definitely see Jupiter retrograding. It's going to be, and it retrogrades in square to the full moon. Let me see, when does Jupiter retrograde? I know it's coming up pretty soon. Hang on. I apologize if you're like, okay, I don't want to wait for this. It's mid-June, so the 19th of June, Jupiter retrogrades. And so we're really feeling that square going on with this full moon, and it means that we want to move, but maybe we need to do the sentimental choice. And I think I've kind of reconciled some of my situation as well about where I'm moving, because I'm torn between doing what I want to do and doing what I can do to be near my kids. And that's kind of why I'm a bit in limbo right now. But Jupiter retrograding and then squaring the full moon. It's not going to retrograde until after the moon is full, but it is at the early degrees. And so as we come into that full moon, and again, that date is the 26th of May. So May 26th, where are we moving? What are the reasons we're moving there? And what can we learn? How can we grow? Are we going to leave, or are we going to stay? What is the coping mechanism? It's a jumping off point to a new story, but yet it is a story that's based in old emotions. And so you're really being asked, where do you want to go with this story? Jupiter initiated a move, but the full moon in Sagittarius is really wrapping up the old story around where you may want to move and really clearing the path for a new story. So just be aware of your Sagittarius house and your Pisces house. There's just so much going on right now with that axis, the Virgo, Gemini, Pisces, Sagittarius energy. So it's about ideas and about movement, and also emotion, deep emotion and emotion from the past. I'm going to stop there. We're approaching the Mercury retrograde next week, so definitely pay attention to what's initiating next week under your ideas and what you want to learn, how you want to express yourself and grow your technology, your pets. All of these are going to be something that are fair game for the Mercury retrograde. And with that, we'll probably talk a lot more about Mercury retrograde next week, and I appreciate you following me. If you like the information I give you, please do share it on social media. Like it. I've got Angelic Zodiac on Instagram. I've got it on Patreon. I've got it on YouTube. Well, YouTube, you just have to type in AstroEnergy and then go to angeliczodiac.com to find all of my social media links. And if you want, check out some of my artwork. I've got a piece here. This is this week's illustration. And, well, I have a few this week, but you can see those at Artful Shelley on Instagram, ARTFUL Shelley, SHELLEY. And anyway, take care. I hope you have a wonderful week. And please do contact me if you have questions about the podcast or want to ask something and I can address it on the show. And that's all for this week. Take care. Bye.
Well, check out Angelic Zodiac on Instagram for up-to-date information on events, discounts, blogs and planetary transits at Angelic Zodiac 1 on Instagram. If you would like to see Shelley's art, ShelleyOverton.com, or for astrology art, go to astroart.net. Music provided by Kevin MacLeod at incompetech.com. Music will be credited within the show. Advice given in the program is intended for entertainment purposes only. Join us here next week for more of the Astro Energy Astrology Show podcast. You can find us on iTunes and Google Play, and where podcasts are accessed.